Hi everybody, welcome to Divorce Talk Live series. Today we're having Shauna Warden on. She's going to talk about co-parenting and the new school year. Hi Shauna. Hi.
Hi,
How's it
Karen.
going?
Good. How
Good.
are you?
Always good to have a good chat with you.
Yeah, likewise. I'm excited.
So do you want to give us a little brief bio about yourself before we start?
Sure. So I'm Shauna. I am a divorce coach based in Richmond, Virginia, but I can help, couples or individuals all over the country and Canada. But I basically just help those that are starting out in their divorce journey or haven't started yet, really figure out a game plan, know what to do, how the process works. And my goal is to set you up for success. That way there aren't as many roadblocks along the way because you've already been kind of trained on how to handle them all.
Yeah, true enough. So today we're going to talk about something. The reason why I want to talk about this because you just wrote a blog about this,
Mm-hmm.
about co-parenting and going back to school. We already know whether you're divorcing or not, it's challenging enough to get back into the school routine. But when you're co-parenting, it's even more stressful, I think, or different stressful. So what are the things that you find that would be helpful for these co-parenting challenges I come up with going back to school? Oh, did we lose Shauna? Okay, let me try.
Can you see me? Okay.
Yeah, I was like talking and you froze and I went, okay.
I
So
could
anyways,
hear you and see you, but I couldn't see myself. So anyway, I heard what you said.
okay.
So yes, thank you. So like you said, going back to school is stressful for every family in America and across the world. But it's compounded even
Mm-hmm.
more so when you are co-parenting, especially at those beginning years when you're still figuring out what that looks like. Um, and so definitely the way to set it up for me, and I think it really depends on your co-parenting situation. If you are amicable, it makes everything else so much easier, right?
Mm-hmm.
um, but if you're not amicable, it's like, how do I do this and not get everybody at the school involved in our drama and make the kid feel weird? And so in my blog, I talked about just hopefully setting some expectations with your co-parent ahead of time. If anybody has a parenting plan, if you know me, I talk about parenting plans ad nauseum.
Mm-hmm.
But it is a good idea to just set expectations between the two of you on what that's going to look like. What are pickup and drop offs going to look like? If there's a parent conference or a back to school night, are you both going, or is
Mm-hmm.
only the person whose day it falls on going? And then if you're not both going, what does the communication look like to the other parent that didn't go? And is that even your responsibility? So we can talk
Mm-hmm.
about that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if you have to communicate with the teacher, do you need to CC the other parent on every email? I know that's something that, like, all of these things I dealt with personally
Mm-hmm.
myself. So I know it can be really tricky, especially if you have a high conflict situation.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Yeah, I would say communication is probably the biggest form of breakdown when it comes to this type of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that's why you mentioned why you talk about co-parenting so much, the plans, because you really need to figure all these little things out, right? Because I didn't know when I was going through it, like when making the parenting plan, well, simple. Like I didn't think you need so much detail, but you really do need that for both of your sakes, right? As you go through that. Yes.
Absolutely. And
Hmm.
it's to avoid any type of confrontation or
Hmm.
hurt feelings. Not that that's, your responsibility, but even on the other side, if, let's say, your ex went on a field trip or went to every event, was emailing the teacher, like, what if there was a problem going on with your child and there was all this communication between the teacher and the one parent, and the other parent's totally left out and has no idea that this is even going on. So that doesn't feel good if you're that parent that's being left out. Now, if you're a parent who chooses not to be involved in those things and you trust the other person to just handle it, there's so many different ways that it can go. It's just, again, setting the boundaries and expectations so that both people are on the same page and nobody's feelings are getting hurt, nobody's feeling left out.
And that's always a challenge too, right? Especially at the beginning, right? It's always so much more emotional and more charging at the beginning. Is there any other things, any other tips that you can give them? Like, we know communication is really good. I guess after summertime, when the routines have all been nice and slow, and mistakes can happen in the beginning part of, August, September, when a lot of kids are going back to school. So I guess it would also be, be patient with your other co-parent if things aren't always, and your children too, right? So, because they're now maybe transitioning more between two homes, right? Where the summertime it may have been longer breaks, right? So I don't know if you've seen that.
Yeah, I think just like I said in my blog, it's all about communication, being flexible, being, giving each other grace, maybe just having like a back to school conversation about, okay, this is what time we're doing bedtime this year at my house. Yeah, I think it's really important to keep the routines the same at both houses if you can. Sometimes that's out of our control. But just letting them know any changes that have come up, bedtime, homework, when do you expect homework to be done? And, if the kid gets off the bus at mom's house and does his homework immediately, is that what's going to happen at dad's? Or is dad like, okay, come home and relax and then we'll do homework later? It really doesn't matter as long as the work's getting done. But just having those conversations, if you're struggling to get homework done at your house and dad isn't, hey dad, what are you doing so that I can do that at my house? And that way the kid knows that no matter whose house they're at, it's the same rules. Is that always possible? No. But I think just having those, you can then decide, okay, is this going to work for me or not? So I think it's just really important.
I do really love what you say though. Like, if you can, and not everybody can do that, and we'll talk about that this fall, but if you can, I think having a pre-talk school is really good for the parents. If not in person, then maybe email, right? Like, this is, as well as activities they're going to be in, right? Because there's a lot of school activities, right? And as well as extracurricular activities. So to be somewhat on the same page is what's in the best interest of the child. So
I do want to point out one thing that I thought was really good advice that I heard another divorce coach say back before I was a divorce coach. And it really changed things for me because I was super guilty of doing this, is that, and I'll just say women are probably more stereotypically the ones doing a lot of the school type things. And so the advice I have to those out there, man or woman, whoever's in charge of, the school stuff, you are not the secretary for your other parent. And I am the person that needed to hear that, right? Because at least in the US, and I'm sure we share a lot between US and Canada, so correct me if it's different, but in the US, you both have the same rights to access the school records, right? And so when you're filling out all of those forms at the beginning of the year, make sure both mom and dad's contact information are on those forms, unless there's a reason otherwise. If there's like an order that states they can't have access, of course, follow that order. But I'm just speaking generally, we all have the same access. So mom and dad are both getting the same emails, the newsletters, the flyers, the dates, and, they send them ad nauseum. There's like no way you cannot know what's going on. But I was so guilty of then, again, being like, okay, make sure that like you're at the parent conference at this time, or, Cash has a field trip on this day, and this is where I didn't need to do that, right? And then it becomes where they're only solely relying on you for this information. And so let's say one time you forget to tell them about something. Now it's your fault that they didn't go. Um, unless it's like something, parent conferences where it's like, even then they can sign up for their own parent conference unless you guys do want to do it together. I think the only thing was like at the open house, I said the time that I was going to go. And again, he could have gone at a different time. But my main point is you do not have to be the secretary for this other parent because they're still getting all of the same memos that they're going to. So if they want to show up to the school events and they're allowed to and all of that, then they will. They see it. You don't have to reiterate everything that's going on. And I was so guilty of that. And once I stopped, it was really a big load off of my shoulders that I'm like, yeah, I don't have to do that's not my job.
No. It's just so funny that you said that because I had the exact same experience.
Really?
Yeah, exact. Because we are, and more us than the men, not everybody, because everyone's different, but I was the same as you. It was like, I was the secretary and the manager. So I had to be told, and by back then it was by my therapist that you don't need to do that role anymore.
Right.
You don't need to. They are also responsible for their parenting, right? So I did it for a while, and then I eventually, and it's kind of liberating, but it's also not your responsibility. The parent, we're both parents. The other parent has just as much responsibility to figure it out, whether they're going to the music concert or to the sporting event or to open house school. You don't have to do that, except what you said, like the odd thing, I'm going from here to here or whatever you want to communicate. But you're right. Yeah, it was just so funny because I'm like sitting there going, yep, me too. So it's probably a pretty common thing. So
yes.
That's a good advice.
And I don't know about your experience, but for me, it was like once I stopped relaying the information, it was really interesting to me to see how many things they came to. Like, I don't know if they came only because they knew, you know what I mean? Like, if it's coming from the school is one thing. If it's coming from Shauna,
it's another thing.
It's a different thing.
Yes,
so
I agree.
That was just really interesting, and that's a whole other emotional for me thing that was like, wow, it's just interesting to see like what they show up for and what they don't show up for when it's not demanded. Not that I was demanding it, but do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, we're gonna have to talk about that this fall.
Okay.
Because I think co-parenting with narcissists is different than co-parenting, right? So we're going to talk about that.
Okay.
But I also had to ask you too, and I did this as well, is do you let the teachers know that you're in a divorce or that you're separated, or watch, like I did. The first year I definitely did. I emailed both the teachers and said, look, this is what's going on. I just want to make sure, just in case you see patterns of behaviors or anxiety or whatever that's not, normal, because a lot of anxiety is normal nowadays. So I recommend that too. You may want to not talk badly about the other parent, just tell the teacher that this is what's going on and that's it. Just a blank statement, just to keep you informed, and the other parent as well.
Yeah, 100%. So I think that also depends on people's situation and their custody schedule. So back when we had split custody, I for sure did, because the transportation was different on those days. And so, and I do think it's helpful to know, because I think people still assume mom and dad are together unless you say otherwise, right? And so the kindergarten and first grade, I did. And like you said, the anxiety of the kid, the weird transition period, all of those things I did. When we switched over to full custody, like I haven't told his teacher this year because he's coming home the same way every day, and there really hasn't been like a need. But I certainly did those first few years as well. And I do think, as a former teacher myself, information is power, right? And so the more that we know, the less we assume. And I err on the side of caution. So I would always be forthcoming and telling them like what the situation is.
Yeah. I just think for the teacher as well, right? Because, we do worry about the kids in big transitions like this. So
yeah, and especially
good.
Like you said, if there's behavior problems, as a teacher, that was my first question. Like, what is your home life like? Not to be nosy, but just like what is going on outside of the house or outside of school that might be affecting their schoolwork or their
Hmm.
socialization with other kids or their moods, things like that. And so I do think it's really important for teachers to know so that they can also be on the team
Hmm.
helping this kid.
Yeah, I agree. Is there any things that you see that could go terribly wrong, or that any things that, like, we know that fighting in front of schools, which I've actually know that's happened, where parents
Mm-hmm.
have fought in school, like in front of the kids at school. So that's a big no-no. We all know that. Is there any other things that, you want to tell anybody that, don't do this? Is there any?
I think just to piggyback on that other conversation we were just having about informing the teachers, I mean, the teacher, the nurse, the front
Mhm.
desk, especially if there's something, when our custody schedule changed, I, made sure immediately to let the school know, bring in the court order, and they were very good about asking questions because they don't want to send, let's say there was a restraining order and dad
Mhm.
has been coming to pick up the kid this whole time, and now he's not allowed to. They need to know that.
Yeah.
And so just letting them know specifically what, dad's no longer, because they asked me, is dad still allowed to pick him up? And, we didn't have a restraining order. And so that was the conversation that they have to make sure that they're covered on their end as well. Right. And so
Mhm.
just being very open with them. And, one of my things that we ran into in years past was homework, like when we had shared custody or the folder or the things getting lost in the book bag. I mean, that was a huge, if there's money due one day and like he's at dad's and that doesn't get turned in, like it's just, again, all about communication and just being open, like with the teacher and saying, okay, well, dad's bringing him in, but I'm going to send money this way for whatever. And just making sure that everybody's on the same page. Make sure that you've got some kind of routine for, especially in I'm mostly talking about like younger kids that aren't super responsible yet. Make sure their homework is getting done. Make sure that their things are getting turned in, especially
Mhm.
if the other parent is known for not really being organized or making sure
Mhm.
that they're getting those things done, because you don't want your kid to suffer because of
Yeah.
what's going on.
Yeah.
And hopefully the other parent isn't doing that as like a vindictive thing. Maybe that's just their personality and they don't pay attention. Um, but I think those things are important, especially with the younger elementary school
Mhm.
kids and fresh divorces and things like that. And just like everything else, it takes time to get that routine. It takes time for everyone to kind of know their role and like what you're responsible for and what you're not responsible for. So just give yourself and your partner some grace,
Yeah.
and your kid too.
And your kid, I was about to say, and your child too. First of all, going back to school is always, it's exciting, but always grumbles too. They like the first couple of days and they're like, okay, I'm done now. I'm like, no, you're not.
Right.
Right?
Oh my gosh. Cash came home the first day and he was going to bed and he was like, I have to do that all again tomorrow. I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, and like a lot of days after
Mhm.
that.
Yeah. 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 So I like that we can end with that. Just give yourself and your co-parent and your child or children grace, because that's what you need, because it's a lot. So,
Absolutely. Yes. So, yeah, if anybody has any other
mhm.
questions, they can certainly reach out to me at shaunawarden@gmail.com or visit the website shaunawardencoaching.com. So, but thank you, Karen. I thought this was like a great topic for us to have at the beginning of the school year.
It's all because of your blog. But we'll be back. We're going to do a series about more of the toxic divorces. So that'll be interesting. So
Yes.
if you have any questions or anything, you can email me at karen@divorceworkshop.ca, or our webpage is divorceworkshop.ca. Anyways, we'll talk to you soon, Shauna, and everyone take care.
All right. Thank
Bye.
you.